All right. As long as we see yours, that's the main thing.
I'm not so sure if that's the main thing.
It is the main thing. I agree.
And
Not
the
so
words
sure.
that come out are even better.
Okay.
That's why we're on mute and you not.
Listen, last week the parsha was all about listening or hearing.
Yeah.
By Ishma Yitro, Yitro heard. You know, as long as you hear, as long as you listen, you don't always have to see. Today's day and age, you know, I think we're trying to we need to compensate for all the other faculties that we've lost.
Can I have a glass of cold water?
You know, COVID takes away your sense of smell and taste. We've taken away the idea of touch. We can't be close to people. There's no more pats on the back or handshakes or hugs and kisses. And so we're only left with sight and sound, right? So maybe we've got to overcompensate with those things. So instead of just hearing, we must see as well. Yeah. I don't know, just an introductory vote on COVID protocols.
If you don't know it yet, yeah.
Listen, the fact of the matter is, you know, that it's still very, very vague about what these actual protocols are. Do you know? I mean, I don't know if you do, but do you know that legally, you cannot have even one person over to your house who doesn't live under the same roof as you? You know that's the law at the moment. That's called a gathering. A gathering is two people. So if you have one person who doesn't live at your house come over to your house, according to the law, you're breaking the law. That's the rule. I didn't make it. The government did. Yeah. Did you know that? I mean, until recently, I wasn't aware of that. But that is actually the rule. So unfortunately, yeah. I mean, will I admit to the fact that my kids come over? Yes, my kids come over. But according to the law, if they live in a different house, they should not come to you for a meal, for a dinner, for Shabbos, for whatever. They shouldn't. According to the law, if they live, sorry, Roz, you're trying to say something. If you don't press that unmute button, we can't hear you.
Good. Okay, let's try.
Now we can hear you, yes.
Oh, sorry. But is there not a minimum or a maximum number that you are permitted?
No. The maximum, you're not allowed one. You're not allowed one or more. Nobody is, it's called a gathering. They have banned social gatherings. And a social gathering is two people.
Oi, I'm breaking the law every day.
So we all are. So that's the point. So they've made it, but nobody knows that. It's vague. It's the whole thing about shuls and so on. And this is where the discussion came up in a meeting that we were part of. Is that in a shul environment? So why is Sydenham Shul joining me here?
Maybe somebody under the name of Sid Shul.
Okay, I'm getting a Sid. Hello?
Hello, Rabbi. I think it's mine. I don't know why. It's Odette.
Oh,
okay.
There's been some error. Sorry.
That's okay. I thought maybe you stole their computer.
If I stole their computer, I certainly wouldn't make it obvious to you, and I wouldn't do it in the first place.
No, but you could have stolen the computer and said you don't know why. You know. Anyway, the fact is that this is why when it comes to a shul environment, they've been very specific. You are allowed to have gatherings at shul for prayer services, for religious services. You're not allowed to have a gathering at shul as the law stands at the moment. You can't have a gathering at a shul at the moment for a meal. You can't have a gathering at the shul at the moment for a social event, or even I don't think you're allowed to even have for a shir. If we had this shir in person at the moment, I think it's illegal. Because you're allowed prayer services, you're allowed services. So yes, if we daven the mincha together and then we learn something, that would probably be okay. But it's allowed for the prayer services, not for any other gatherings, and certainly not for a social gathering. And a social gathering is not allowed at home, and it's not allowed, and even in a restaurant. So everybody's saying restaurants. The rules about a restaurant is you can't make a gathering there either. You can't invite friends and have a gathering at a restaurant, but you can go out with your dearly beloved for a meal and sit at your own table and not interact officially with everybody else, although we know that that's nonsense. But that's the rule of restaurants as well. Not allowed to have a gathering. We can't. I couldn't make my I don't know, my bar mitzvah party or my daughter's 21st or whatever. I couldn't make that at a restaurant and say, we're having 40, 50 people and they're all sitting at separate tables. Illegal. Not allowed to do that. That's the rules at the moment. Anyway, let's spend some time learning something. And I do think that we are headed for an exceptional Shabbos. An exceptional Shabbos this weekend is underscored and underlined by the fact that we're going to take out 3 Torahs from the Aron Kodesh. 3 Sifrei Torah on this coming Shabbos. Now, it's a great rarity that 3 Torahs are removed simultaneously from the Aron Kodesh, from the Ark, in Shul. We would probably all have seen it on Kol Nidre night. Kol Nidre, if you remember what it's like to go to Shul, and you remember what it was like to go to Shul on Kol Nidre, only joking, if you remember what it was like to go to Shul on Kol Nidre, you would remember that they take 3 Torahs out of the Aron Kodesh, and the Gabba, the chairman, and the rabbi maybe, and maybe the person who has purchased this big honor, it was regarded to as a big honor to buy the honor of holding a Torah at Kol Nidre, they would surround the Chazan, stand next to and around the Chazan with 3 Torahs, old tradition. And there the Torahs are not opened and they're not read, but 3 Torahs are removed from the Aron Kodesh. The other time that you may have seen 3 Torahs removed and read from the Aron Kodesh, read from the 3 Torahs, is on Simchas Torah. On Simchat Torah, we have 3 specific Torah readings. We read the end of the book of Dvarim, we complete the Torah. We read the beginning of Breshit, we start the Torah from a separate Torah. And then there's the third one, which is all about Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. We read portions from the 3 different Torahs. There are only 3 other possible occasions in the Jewish calendar year where 3 Torahs may be read on a given date. So on a Shabbat, on a regular Shabbos, we only read 1. On a Shabbos that perhaps coincides with Rosh Chodesh, for instance, 2. Shabbos, the Parsha, and the Rosh Chodesh reading. On a Yom Tov, 2. There's always 2 Torahs on a Yom Tov, on a Pesach, on a Shavuot, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, because there's the regular standard Torah reading, and then there is the special reading that's done of the sacrifices for that particular Chag, which we usually read for the Maftir. Now, there are only 3 occasions when there is a possibility that 3 Torahs would be taken out of the Ark and a section read from each one. And those 3 possibilities are when Rosh Chodesh Tevet coincides with Shabbat, it would also be Chanukah. Rosh Chodesh Tevet is towards the end of Hanukkah. And when and if it coincides with Shabbos, then you would have a Shabbat Torah reading, you would have a Rosh Chodesh Torah reading, and you would have a Hanukkah Torah reading, each from a separate Torah. So that's one possibility, and it doesn't always happen because Rosh Chodesh doesn't always fall out on Shabbos. The second possibility is this coming Shabbos, where we have Rosh Chodesh, which coincides with Shabbos. So you've got a Shabbat Torah reading, and you've got a Rosh Chodesh Torah reading. And because it is the Shabbos leading into Adar, the month of Adar, we begin one of 4 special Torah readings that take place every year before Pesach, and it's called Shekalim. Shkalim. This Shabbos is known as Shabbat Shkalim. So we have Torah reading, regular parsha. We have Rosh Chodesh, second Torah, third Torah, Shkalim, where we read all about the idea of the half shekel that each person had to bring for the communal sacrifices in the Beit HaMikdash. There is a third possibility, and that would be in a few weeks' time, where if Rosh Chodesh Nisan corresponds with Shabbos, and we also then would read Parshat HaChodesh, about HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, the instruction to make our calendar and run it with Pesach being in the first month and so on, then you would have, and that is the fourth of those 4 special readings that take place before Pesach, you would have Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, HaChodesh, and we would take out 3 Torahs. If the shul has 3 Torahs, take out 3 Torahs, and a section is read from each one of the 3. But all in all, what it actually gives us is a little bit of an insight into the power of the Shabbos. You know, when we take out 1 Torah from the Ark, it's a great occasion. It's either a Shabbos, it's a Yom Tov, it's a Rosh Chodesh, it's a weekday on which, like a Monday and Thursday, when we read the Torah, there is something heightened about the power of the day because we have a Torah reading of that day. When it is doubled, so it's got a double emphasis, double power. When we're taking out 3, well, I can only say that just to one's logic and mind's eye, it would mean that we've got a Shabbos coming up, which in a way has to be in some way comparable to Simchat Torah and comparable to Yom Kippur. And maybe if you wanted to, before Shabbos, ask your children, your grandchildren, the members of your household with whom you are allowed to have a party, a Shabbos meal, etc., and you want to ask them, what is the similarity between this Shabbos and Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre, and Simchas Torah? Well, there's your answer. 3 Torahs are taken out of the Aron Kodesh. But that within itself gives a tremendous power and a tremendous emphasis to this Shabbos. Now, the concept of public Torah readings, the concept of a public Torah reading was not always there. The idea of having a public Torah reading actually doesn't say anywhere, you know, people always will, show me in the Torah where it says that you've got to do this. Show me in the Torah. I mean, one of them, show me in the Torah where it says that a man must wear a yarmulke. You're not going to find a reference to a yarmulke anywhere in the Torah, in the Chumash, in the actual law, right? But so where in the Torah does it say that you must read from the Torah? Well, there is, there are really 2 occasions where it says specifically that the Torah must be read, that this must be emphasized. One is coming up next week with Shabbat Zachor, with the Shabbos before Purim, where we're told about the obligation to hear the reading of the Torah on Zachor is a Torah obligation. And the second one is at the time of Hakel, when the whole Jewish people were gathered together, it says that the king would gather everybody together and he would read from the Torah. And that happened once every 7 years in Yerushalayim. It's not something that any of us have ever seen in our fleshy eyes, right? So the idea of Torah readings was something that was instituted into the structure of Jewish life in order to make sure that people heard Torah. The sages of old were concerned, and it especially dates back to the time of Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe, who was the leader of the Jewish people at the time of the return, kind of just after the Purim story, when the Jewish people, when that happened in history, when the Jewish people returned to Eretz Yisrael, when they went back to Israel, and they were beginning with the reconstruction of the Beit HaMikdash, there was an awareness of the fact that in the times when the temple was around, people have kind of a spiritual guide on a regular basis. In the times when everybody was in Israel, there was a yearning for Torah learning. And there's a nice, I'm a poet and I don't know it, right? There was yearning for Torah learning. When it came to exile times, they were worried. People are split up all over the place. Is there going to be the same passion for Torah learning? So Ezra came up with the idea that there should be occasions where somebody stands up. I always use the image of going into the marketplace and standing on a tomato box. But modern people don't know what a tomato box is anymore. But they would stand on a box and read out words of Torah. So if you or the farmers or the people who are coming to sell their wares in the marketplace haven't heard any Torah this week, at least they'll hear then. And Ezra instituted the idea of public Torah readings spaced at a space whereby there is never 3 days. 3 days does not go by in the Jewish calendar without a public Torah reading. And the logic was that man cannot live without water for 3 days, and so the Jewish soul cannot live without Torah for 3 days. And so there was the institution of public Torah readings, and they pinned it to times when Jews would be gathering anyway. On Shabbos, Jews can gather, so they instituted it on Shabbos, and on Mondays and Thursdays were market days of old, so they instituted that public Torah reading should take place. The sages then divided up the Torah into different parshas, into different sedras, and they spaced them out according to the year. And I think I've mentioned to you before that there are 53 parshas. They divided the Torah up into 53 parshas. But they went further and they said that when it comes to a Rosh Chodesh, this is a portion that should be read on Rosh Chodesh. So if it's Rosh Chodesh and it's Shabbat, we read the Shabbat Torah reading and we read Rosh Chodesh. If it's a Yom Tov, the Yom Tov cancels out the regular run-of-the-mill, let's call it, Torah reading, and it's replaced by a Yom Tov Torah reading. And if it comes to a time like this, where we institute a special Torah reading that takes place before a Chag, before, like now, before Purim and before Pesach, those special Torah readings are read in addition to the other Torah readings that are being read. What does it kind of emphasize for us is this type of Shabbos has a certain spiritual atmosphere and emphasis that is connoted by these different Torah readings. Why? So sages of old, including people like the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who famously said, Ayid dav leben mit der Zeit. A Jew has to live with the time. What did he mean when he said a Jew has to live with the time? He didn't mean we've got to follow the mores and the fashions of the society within which we live, but he did mean that we've got to live with the time, which is the portion of the week. So our sages fully understood and were very, very cognizant of, and they pushed the notion that what we read in the Torah of a particular week has an influence on the atmosphere, not just of that Shabbos, but of your whole week. And it's not only the week before, most of them say, but the week afterwards as well. There is something that injects into the atmosphere, that portion, that parsha, and we should live with it. We should be not only learning it and studying it, but actually you can find certain key elements. Time and time and time again in every parsha, you can find certain elements that have an influence on the very week that you have had, or that you will have, or that you're experiencing at the moment. I don't know about you, but I certainly find, and I think it's true of all of us when we study anything in Torah, is when you learn something, you think you know it, and you go back and you learn it again, and you realize you didn't know it the first time. Why? Because the second time seems to reveal all sorts of stuff that you can't even believe was there at first. And this is particularly true when we're studying Torah and when you're looking at the parsha of the week. I can guarantee you, if you think you know what's going on in a particular parsha, go back, or go now, or go on Shabbos and read it again, and it's like you never saw it before. There are new elements. There are things that you, in one way of looking at it, you gloss over. This is the beauty, the depth of Torah, is you can keep on digging and digging and digging and revealing and finding more and more and more and more and more. And so each year, by the same notion, each year, the parsha of a particular Shabbos has a different role to play, in a way, a different emphasis on the particular week that you are in. It's not, well, okay, you know what, last year we read Parshas Mishpatim, which we're going to read this Shabbos. Last year we read it, and I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt, heard it all before. Come on, we're going through it again. No, every year there is actually something new. There is something that it brings out that is powerful, that is different, that is new. And it could just be, yes, that it's obvious that, yeah, we're just focusing. It was there all the time, but you focus on something new. You see something new. There's something you didn't notice before. If you look at you look at a painting, lahavdil, but you look at a painting, you see a certain picture, and you maybe are looking at it from a certain angle or in a certain way. You only see what your eyes are picking up in that first look. When you go back and you look at it again, you say, wait 1 second, I didn't even notice that was painted into the picture, that there was a background there that was a little different. I didn't notice the beauty of the colors that were being used. There are certain things and nuances that you don't pick up at the first glance. And this is the whole idea of a parsha, that we unpack it and we look at it, and it's different every time. But what I really wanted to bring out today was the idea of how the general themes of the parshas have relevance to the time that you're in. And then we have to think about when we have 3 Torahs and 3 different segments that we're going to be reading on this Shabbos, for instance, how each one has to and does play a role in our lives and in the things that we've got to learn from it at the moment. And strangely enough, there is kind of a synchronicity in a way between them all as well. So if we take general overview of the Parsha Mishpatim. Mishpatim is going to be read on Shabbos from the first Torah. Mishpatim. By the way, I think that I should just mention, in case you were wondering about the order, who decided that we should first read Mishpatim, then we're going to read Rosh Chodesh, and then we're going to read Shkalim. Maybe it should be the other way around. First read Shkalim, then Rosh Chodesh, then, or any concoction of the 3. And does it matter which order you actually do it in? Maybe just see where the Torahs are rolled to and just read that parsha. Who actually cares if there's an order? Torah says, no, there's a discipline to this thing. The halacha is, and here's the halacha, todir v'she'eino todir, todir kodem. It says, if you've got something that's regular and something that's not regular, the thing that's regular always goes first. I'll give you an example. I know that I'm very well aware of the fact that I'm talking to a group of ladies, but Men actually practice this on a daily basis when they put on their talis and tefillin. Because here's the challenge for you, being that you don't put on talis and tefillin, as far as I know, right? You don't put on talis and tefillin. Here's the challenge for you. What comes first, the talis or the tefillin? There would be a good argument to say that the tefillin should come first, because the tefillin is regarded as the more important mitzvah. It's got more kedusha, holiness to it. There are words written on parchment inside there, mimicking, similar to a mezuzah, similar to a sefer Torah. So maybe the tefillin should be first. We should show preference for what's first. So they say no. The principle is todir v'she'eno todir, todir kodem. Something that you do regularly and something that you don't do so regularly, the regular comes first. That's a Torah principle. What's more regular? Talis is more regular. Because we even wear talis on Shabbos. We don't wear tefillin on Shabbos. You wear talis on Yom Tov. You don't wear tefillin on Yom Tov. So that's the more regular. That's the more standard. So the more standard, the more regular comes first. We put on it. There's the decision. Talis comes first. Now we have the same principle here when we talk about the Torah readings. Todir v'she'eno todir, todir kodem, which means the thing that is regular comes first. What's regular? Regular is Shabbos. What would ordinarily be read on Shabbos? That comes first. The regular parsha. Second, Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh comes 12 times at least in a year. Sometimes it's 13 when we have a leap year, right? 12 times a year. That's second regular. Rosh Chodesh reads second. How often does Parsha Shkalim come around? Once a year. That comes third. So there's your decision. 1, 2, 3. That's the way that it lines up. But in Parshas Mishpatim, we're dealing with a type of law that has, as I would phrase it, a rhyme and a reason. What does it mean? There are certain Jewish laws which have neither, and again, my phrase, rhyme or reason. What does that mean? There are some Jewish laws that seem to us to be completely illogical. And don't follow a logical pattern that we can work out and say, got that, understood it. The classical example, of course, is the para aduma, the red heifer, where you've got a red cow that you've got to find, which is a rarity. Then you burn it, and then you sprinkle its ash on the head of someone who's impure and makes him pure. You can't explain it in a logical fashion. And the person who does the sprinkling becomes impure and so on. It's called a chok. It's a kind of law where there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or a reason. And we certainly would not have concluded that that should be the law if we were writing laws. If somebody said to you, okay, go and make a thing of how to purify, I don't think anybody in their wildest dreams would invent the concept of a red heifer, a red cow. It's not something that we would have without God having told us that we must do it. There's a second category of rules and regulations in the Torah, which are ones that have the one, but they don't have the other. In other words, we would not have arrived at them ourselves. They're not laws that we would have deduced, but once they're there, they make perfect sense. For instance, I'll give you Shabbos. Who would have invented that Shabbos should be Shabbos if it wasn't for God giving it to us? Once it's there, well, I get the logic. I don't know about you, but I look forward to Shabbos from Sunday morning, right? Or from Saturday night. We look forward to the next Shabbos. The Shabbos is a gift. It's wonderful. It's a break. It's different. It's wonderful. It's great. There's a system to it that we grasp, that we understand. There is a third set of rules, which is, in fact, in a way, more complicated. And those are the rules that we're dealing with on this Shabbos. And why I say they're more complicated is because they are all rules that we call Mishpatim. Mishpatim are rules, laws, that 99.9% of the time, you or I would have arrived at the conclusion that those should be the rules, even if the Torah didn't give it to us. So you have to ask the question, then, why does Torah give it to us? So they're rules, therefore they've got a logic, they make sense, and we would have decided them ourselves, even if Torah hadn't given it to us. So, for instance, you're not allowed to steal. And if I steal from you, I've got to I've got to give the item back that I stole. And if it cost you, I've got to pay you for the loss that you incurred. Logical rules. Why do we need the Torah to tell us that? So the Torah tells us that we need it because the same logic that gets you into a rule can also get you out of it. If you're just employing your logic, your rationale, your reasoning, the same logic that gets you in can get you out of it. Or I'll use a more colloquial kind of an example. A government, I mean, please don't quote me on this, and I know that this is going out on YouTube and all sorts of other things, but it is possible, I think you'll agree, that a government can make very, very strict rules and regulations, but they themselves don't keep to them. Ever seen that before? Right? Never seen it, yeah? You're nodding your heads, yes or no? Yeah, you've never seen it. Why? Because governments can make that kind of thing. They can tell you not to steal, but they can steal. They can tell you to wear a mask, but they don't have to wear a mask. They can tell you not to have 100 or more people at a ceremony, but they can have. There are all sorts of things that government. So that's the problem with man-made rules. Man-made rules are subjective and they're based on logic, and the people who make them can break them, or so they think, right? I remember it, didn't you at school also? We all must obey them, even the Queen. What was that about traffic rules, I think? Everybody's got to obey them, even the Queen. But we see that in practicality, the people flaunt it and they don't always. But you or I might have a rule or regulation, such as theft, for instance, where I might say, okay, I'm not allowed to steal. If I stole this, I'm committing a crime. But what if I'm starving? Can I steal it if I'm starving? You know what? I'm starving. I'm hungry. If I steal it and I sell it and then I go and buy something to eat, okay, I can justify it in my head. We can start working out the rationale. So we need Torah to tell us, hey, 1 second. The rule of not stealing is not because man said you shouldn't steal, or because the police said you shouldn't steal, or because you can go to jail, or because a judge might tell you that you're not allowed to steal. No. We're not allowed to steal because this is part of our Avodat Hashem. This is part of our service of God. And that's what these rules are all about. It's actually the more difficult, while we could think that it's more logical, therefore it's easier to keep. I challenge you by saying that this is the more difficult part of the law to keep. I'm going to throw a cat amongst the pigeons here. Isn't the taina, or the complaint of the world out there very often against the frumies, the frum community? They're going to shul and they're davening, but they don't behave like mention in the street. They don't deal nicely with people in business, etc. You don't often hear the complaint the other way around. Could you imagine somebody saying to a businessman who's known for his great business ethics, say to him, you know what? You're a fraud. You sit in business the whole time and you deal so kindly and nicely with everybody and everything is legal and you pay your taxes on time, but you don't go to shul. You don't keep kosher. You don't hear it that way, right? Why? Because logically speaking, these rules seem to make more sense to us. And therefore you would imagine that they should be easier to keep. I'm telling you, they're more difficult to keep. These rules are more difficult to keep. It's actually quite easy to keep kosher and keep Shabbos and so on. It doesn't take that much effort. But when you're tempted by something that you would like to steal from somebody or whatever, it's a bigger challenge for a person. Money matters. There's a good phrase there, money matters. Money matters are much more difficult for people to actually deal with, and the Menschlichkeit, the human behaviors sometimes are much more difficult for people than the behaviors between ourselves and God. And that's why Torah comes along on this Shabbos and tells us Mishpatim. These rules, we have to know, although they may seem to you to be so logical, they are also rather difficult. But let's look at them in the same way as we look at all the rules and regulations that come between ourselves and God, and understand that your interpersonal relationship, or the dialect or the action that you might take against your fellow man, or because of your fellow man, or with your fellow man, is every bit as important as honoring your father and mother, and every bit as important as worshipping one God and not having any other gods before God. It's the same God who gave us the rules at Mount Sinai of how to behave towards God, gave us the rules at Mount Sinai about how to behave towards our fellow man. That is, in a gist, the concept of Mishpatim that we have in the first Torah that we're going to read. The second Torah, we read all about the Rosh Chodesh. This Rosh Chodesh particularly is a Rosh Chodesh that starts off the month of Adar. And it is about the month of Adar that it says, Mishenichnas Adar Marbin Besimcha. From Adar. And in fact, we could say that it's actually from tonight. Tonight is already Rosh Chodesh. It's the last day, tonight and tomorrow, of the month of Shvat. But we're already heading into the month of Adar. Now, God's got a good sense of humor. And it was in the month of Adar last year, Purim time, that the whole thing of coronavirus all started all over the world. It's a part of the challenge. As people have said, we put on our masks for Purim and we've never been able to take them off. The fact of the matter is that it was in Adar last year that this all began. But against that background as well, at a time of difficulty, it's hard to see Simcha. It's hard to really understand what does it mean that right now we're going into a time of Simcha. And perhaps, once again, we've got to apply our minds and our hearts to understanding that we've got to step up our Simcha. Our Simcha pH, the level of Simcha within you and within me, needs to be increased. That's what this Rosh Chodesh Adar is actually truly all about. Increase in our elements of joy and our elements of Simcha. And the third Torah that we're going to read from is going to be Parshat Shkalim. Shkalim is all about giving of the half shekel. And this was always done in close proximity to the month of Adar, either just before Rosh Chodesh Adar, or as with this Shabbos, on Rosh Chodesh Adar. And the reason is because this was all about getting your tax affairs in order. This was all about seeing to it that your charities have all been paid up, that everything is in order. Why was that? It was because it certainly had to be done by Nisan, which is in a month from now. So this is like the timely reminder that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you've got 1 month left to get your tax affairs, your spiritual giving affairs, your tzedakah affairs. It's all about getting them in order. And tzedakah, charity, is the very essence, in a way, of Judaism. Because Judaism is based on the notion, on the project of giving. We've got to give. If you're not giving, here's another phrase that has been coined. If you're not giving, you're not living. The idea of giving, and particularly when it comes to tzedakah, when it comes to charity, and maybe particularly when we talk about the half shekel, that had to be given for communal things. When it came to all of those things, if you're not giving, you're not living. If you're not giving, you're not really playing a part within the Jewish nation, within the Jewish people, and in our observance of Torah. So we need to make sure that we're continually giving. I want to throw out there that perhaps there is a very, very important link between these 3 Torah readings and these 3 parshas on the Shabbos. The one is that there is an obligation that we have from this Shabbos of all the things and all the behaviors between us and our fellow men. That's in the first Torah. We have a similar idea in the concept of Shkalim, where we're told that we need to give. And we need to give properly. And we need to make sure that our tax affairs, our tzedakah affairs are all in order. And then we have the idea of how to create simcha. And I think it's all one story. Because if you really want to have a settled life, and you really want to have simcha in your life, and you really want to have the idea of a positive attitude that pervades everything, one needs to actually do things for others. To be caught up in your own place, in your own space, and locked within your own mind and within your own misery sometimes, what that leads to is not only that you don't feel like you're living, but it also leads to the fact that you can't give anymore. The giving promotes more happiness. People are happy when they're doing things for others. People are happy when they are sharing with other people. It's probably been the most difficult thing of this whole year, is the happiness factor has been diminished because we're actually not that much in contact with people. I don't know about you, but I particularly felt it as a rabbi of a shul. When our shuls closed, I personally feel miserable. I don't seem to have the same, I don't feel like I have the same purpose. Yes, you're on Zoom, and yes, you're talking to people on WhatsApp and so on, but I don't feel myself having the same sense of purpose and fulfillment and so on that you have when you're seeing people, when I can give, even if it's just a smile, or when you can give somebody a wave, or when you can give somebody a little bit of advice, whether it's called for or it's not called for. But just the idea of being able to give and to share is part of human nature, and we only really feel happy and fulfilled, I believe, when we're giving. So this is the Shabbos about exploring, I think, what is going to create the happiness that we're talking about for this month of Adar. And I believe it's if we set our targets on realizing, A, that all our laws and all our regulations come from God. Even the rules and regulations between ourselves and our fellow men, they are God-given rules and regulations. In other words, God is in charge of everything. You and me, unfortunately, we're not going to solve the coronavirus problem. I don't know about you, but the vaccines that I've tried to invent don't work, right? And I certainly can't distribute them, and they wouldn't get the approval of the big Makula chief boards of governors. Why? So I don't think I can solve the coronavirus epidemic. But what I can do is realize who actually is in charge of it all. And that's God Almighty. God is in charge of it all. And once I get my head around that idea, and I understand that God has given me a job to do, I've got stuff to do, but He's in charge. And God didn't ask me to cure the coronavirus story. God asked me to live my life as a Jew, keep my mitzvahs, do my Torah learning, share what I can with other people, be a mensch, be a decent human being. That's all the things that God asked me to do. If I'm doing that, then I say, you know what, God, you sort out the coronavirus problem. But I'm happy to hand that over to you, and it increases my happiness factor. There's not much that I can do about all this other stuff, but there is something I can do about my life, and there is something that I can do about the attitude that I give off, and there's something that I can do about sharing what I think is important with other people. There's something that I can do about that stuff. Or using whatever talents I might have for the betterment of others, well, there's something I can do about that. And the second thing is, when I focus my attention on giving to other people, well, it takes the focus off me a little bit, and it lifts some of my depression or sadness or negativity. It makes me feel a lot better. And not only that, but it increases my happiness level. So there are two wonderful things that this Shabbos teaches us. Number one is recognize that God is in charge. Number two is do a little more for others. And therefore, Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. Then when we read from these Torahs, we really will understand what it means that this is going to be a month that's filled with happiness. It's going to be a month that's filled with positive energy. It's going to be a month that's filled with a good outlook, and it's going to be a month that's filled with good and wonderful things. It's dominated by Purim, where God saw to it that through our actions for and with each other, we could turn around great and incredibly powerful decrees in the heavens. the decree to destroy the entire Jewish people. That, of course, was in order. But we managed to turn it all around with our belief in Hashem, as Mordechai and Esther promoted, and with our doing and caring and sharing and giving to others. We were able to have this two-pronged approach, which brought about the great and most wonderful salvation of the Jewish people. And that brings about simcha. That brings about joy. Just want to mention that there's a custom that many have, that on a Shabbos, we eat a kugel. We eat a potato kugel, a carrot kugel, a lokshen kugel, or whatever. When it came to a time when we take out more than one Torah, they say you should have a special kugel for each Torah. So you can go and investigate baking or making now 3 kugels. You can make one lokshen and one potato and one from carrots, or I don't know, whatever else you make for a kugel. And why? So why is it? I think that it's because the whole idea is the Shabbos has a certain flavor. And we want to have the different flavors coming through. A flavor of Mishpatim, and a flavor of Rosh Chodesh, and a flavor of Shkalim. That's the idea perhaps behind the different kugels on Shabbos. But whether you eat 3 kugels or not, we're going to take out 3 Torahs, and it has a huge impact on our lives. And hopefully we'll be able to up the happiness factor, up the happiness level in ourselves and in those around us for not only the coming week, but for the coming month as well. So I wish you all a good Shabbos and a good Chodesh and a very, very happy time ahead. I don't know, am I supposed to do something to let people unmute? I don't know what. I never really know here. I'm sorry. How does this work? Can I unmute everybody? Reactions, stop live stream, chat, participants. Doesn't seem to give me the option. I apologize. I'm not very good at this. I want to get back to in-person teaching. Take care, everybody. Keep well. Let's see if that works.
Unmute. Right, there. Got it.
There we go. I think I got it. I think I got it. Yeah, but it's not letting me. It's not letting me do it for everybody. I don't know. Sorry. Yeah.
Now you've got it. It's right now. Amen,
Okay.
Rabbi, and amen, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, but we're not
Thank you.
getting off. We're not getting off.
Okay. Keep well, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good
Take
Shabbos,
care.
everybody.
A good Shabbos, everybody.
And a good
Rabbi,
Chodesh.
I just want to say something. Rabbi,
Yes.
Rabbi gave us a lovely mnemonic to remember the Torahs. It says, it pays to remember the cow jumped over the moon.
It pays to remember the cow jumped over the moon.
Yeah, it
The
pays
moon.
to remember Zachor, the cow, Para Aduma, jumped over the moon, Chodesh.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Not
that
Not mine.
wasn't that Hey Diddle Diddle, the cat and the fiddle?
Yes, it pays to remember the cow jumped over the moon.
Huh? The little dog laughed to see, so what was it? The little dog laughed to see such sport.
Fun, sport,
Just
and addition.
away with the spoon.
You know, the Rebbe once spoke about the absolute stupidity and even scariness of some of these nursery rhymes. Some of them were awful. In fact, so I was looking at one. I only have one grandson here, so we were looking for stuff for him to watch on YouTube. But the things that you think are so innocuous, and then you think about the message that it's conveying. This was, you know what it was? My mother used to like she had. So I had Yortzeit for my mom during this week. So my mother's gone. For those of you who knew her, she's gone 2 years. It was
Sorry, Hermin.
So thank you. So now she had a poem that she always used to say for us as kids, which was, how did it go? It was about, there was an old lady who swallowed a fly.
Yes, I know that one.
Do you remember that one, right? There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. So I thought, it's a cute thing to show my grandchildren. When you see it, when you see what it says, it's the most horrific thing. And in the end, the old lady swallows a horse, and the conclusion is she's dead, of course. Like, put a kid to sleep. Put a kid to sleep at night, having just told them that this old lady swallowed a fly, and then she swallowed a bird, and then she swallowed a dog, and then she swallowed a cat, and then when she tried to swallow a horse, she died. Like, what is a kid supposed to dream
Excuse me,
about?
and Chad Gadya also ends with the Mavasameh.
Well,
It also
I will tell you that there are some with some people who believe that Chad Gadya was because of its sort of its violent images, that maybe it doesn't belong in the Pesach Seder, but it's meant to be a précis of Jewish history. That's what Chad
He
Gadya is.
doesn't know how to, he's forgotten how to end the shiur to get us off. We had a lovely shiur today.
Oh, so you want to stay on? So stay on. What? I'll just carry on doing whatever I got to do.
Get off.
I'll let you off right now. Take care.
Are you making the 3 kugels for Shabbos?
Keep well, everybody. Take care.